Recently, technology expert Enrique Dons stated, "We cannot prepare young people for the future by denying them the tools of the present." Or if I had to put that more simply, how will our kids ever be job ready if we don't give them more tech today? Now, that's a sentiment many people feel. So today I want to see, is that an accurate sentiment? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's From Theory to Practice, where I take a look at the research so you don't have to. Now, as you know, we're taking a journey through my new book, The Digital Delusion, and we're picking out research that reflects ideas from each chapter. And this week, let's take a look at Chapter 4, Addressing the Apologists. Now, in this chapter, we take a look at the 9 major apologies tech enthusiasts use anytime we try and argue against computers in the classroom. So these are things like tech has so much potential and technology's everywhere, and today kids learn differently, you just don't understand them. One of the biggest apologies you'll hear is that tech makes kids work ready, that without tech, our kids will not be ready for the real world. And this is the digital literacy argument. If the world is computers, our kids need to know how to use computers. So this week, the research I've selected is the International Perspective on Digital Literacy, results from the ICILS 2023. So what is the ICILS? This is the International Computer and Information Literacy Test. So this is a test given to over 130,000 kids around the EU testing digital competence. And this test has been given in 2013, 2018, and 2023. Now, how do they define digital competence? They use 4 dimensions. First is functionality. Do you know how to use these machines? Second is criticality. Do you know how to vet information from these machines? Third is creativity. Do you know how to use this information in a meaningful way? And fourth is safety. Do you know how to behave in these contexts? Now, let's take a look at the scores. So I'm going to show you a quick graph. On the left is the average literacy score across these 12 EU countries. And on the bottom, we're dividing it into the 3 years, 2013, 2018, and 2023. So what has happened to digital literacy over the last decade? Scores have dropped 26 points. That is the equivalent to 11 percentile points. That means a kid who is average today would be only in the 39th percentile of literacy only 10 years ago. Now let's take a look at the percentage of kids who scored competent or above, those who we think can use computers across these 3 testing years. And that value has dropped 13%. That means today almost 40% of kids are digitally illiterate across the EU. But of course, what's the real issue at stake here? How often are kids using and being trained on tech at schools? So let's take a look at a new graph. What is the percentage of kids who report using a computer every single day at school across these 3 years? That value has jumped over 300%. So we're using computers more, yet our literacy in them is weaker. And what about the computer to student ratio? Over those 3 years, it has jumped from 0.12 to 0.83. That means today there are almost more computers in school than students, yet students are doing worse at computers than they were even a decade ago. But okay, what about my US friends? Well, we took this test in 2018 and 2023. So what do we find? Again, computer literacy score has dropped 15 percentile points, which means an average US kid today would only score in the 35th percentile last decade. And what about the percentage of kids who are competent or above? That has dropped 16%. That means half of kids in the US today are technologically illiterate. And this is despite the fact that over 60% of kids today report using a computer every single day in school. That's 70% more than 2018. And when we look at the expenditure on EdTech, it has gone up $6 billion in that time. So we've spent 50% more on tech to see a 15 percentile drop in tech abilities. But yes, this is just a test. Do we actually see this drop in ability reflecting in real life? Well, recently, College Board interviewed over 800 hiring managers, and they asked this question: do you believe students today are less prepared for work than previous generations? How many agreed? 80%. They were acknowledging that somehow kids are coming out less competent in tech. So we're back to Mr. Enrique Dons. We cannot prepare young people for the future by denying them the tools of the present. It looks like the only way to prepare kids for the future is to deny them the tools of the present. Less tech equals better world preparedness. Now, how could that possibly be? The biggest reason is we have mistaken what digital competency is. Most people assume digital competence is the ability to use these devices. And my goodness, kids use these devices all the time. But that's just utilization. True competence is understanding systems. Not can I use the machine, I understand how all the patterns of the machine work. That way I can adapt to however the machine may change in the future. So here's a very good rule of thumb going forward. If you teach someone how to use a tool, they will be able to use that tool. But if you teach somebody how to think and learn, they'll be able to use any tool. And here's where we see education was never meant to be a tools-based system. We have those. Those are called TAFEs, or IT institutes. In TAFE, you learn a skill, like, say, welding. But no one is silly enough to believe that if I teach you how to weld, you're now also going to be the world's best plumber, because we realize tools are confined to very specific context. And more importantly, let's say I teach you welding, but somehow the world of welding evolves and now they use completely different tools. Your training is now obsolete because we recognize we trained you on the wrong tools. So when people come by and they say we need kids to spend more time on tech, otherwise they won't be computer literate, they're making a mistake because the operative word in K through 12 general education was always general. We are not here to teach you a specific thing. We're here to teach you how to think through systems so that you can adapt to anything in the real world. We're not teaching you how to write because we think you're all going to become authors. We're not teaching you history because we think you're all going to become historians. We're teaching you how to think through knowledge so you can start to recognize patterns and take agency over your own learning process. So this is why if you really want computer literacy, don't teach the tool of computers. Teach life literacy. The people who know how to live out here will always be able to live well and perform well on these screens. Which is why, believe it or not, on a lot of international measures of digital competence, millennials outperform Gen Z, even though millennials only got these tools when we were older and kids have had them all their life. Why? Because millennials spent the first 20 years of their life learning how to live life, and then we could adapt it for the tool. Rather than kids who only ever learn the tool, as soon as the tool starts to change and evolve, they struggle to keep up with it. Now, there is one more thing to kind of see what's going on here, and it has to do with what's called transfer. How do I move skills, abilities between contexts? Why, if I train a kid on a tool, can they not use that skill everywhere? The issue is this. It's a concept called additive versus subtractive transfer. So depending on how you initially learned a skill, now when you need to transfer that skill, sometimes you're going to have to do more than you initially learned, sometimes you're going to have to do less. So think about it this way. If you grew up learning how to drive with a manual transmission, and then I put you in a car with an automatic transmission, do you think that's going to be easy or hard to do? It's going to be simple. Why? Because you trained in a much harder context. Now you can almost immediately move your skills over. But flip it. If I train you in an automatic car and then I ask you to drive a car with a manual transmission, is that going to be easy or hard? That's going to be dang near impossible. Why? Because you never learned all the nuances. You're basically starting from scratch. Now, why does this matter? Because remember, computers are easy. That's why they exist. They weren't invented to make our lives harder. They were invented for people who know how the world works to simply interact with that world much easier. So this means when kids learn and train and do most of their thinking online in a very simple context, and we try and take them offline into the real world where it's a very complex context, most of them simply can't do it. They've locked their skills, their thinking into a very narrow window. But flip it, anyone who learns in the very difficult, nuanced, contextual real world and then takes it online, that's subtractive. It's incredibly easy to do. This is why handwriting fluency correlates almost perfectly with typing fluency. The better you are at writing, the better you're going to be at typing. So long as you learned to handwrite first. Anyone who learns to type first, they can't write. So the correlation between the two is almost nothing. And this is that next level we got to think about. When we train kids on tools, we lock their skills to such a narrow context that anytime the tool evolves or the world around them evolves, they simply can't keep up with it. But if instead of teaching digital literacy, we teach life literacy, as we've been doing for decades in K through 12 education, that's how they're going to develop the adaptability that allows them to move more freely through an unknown future. So that's our look at Chapter 4 of The Digital Delusion, Addressing the Apologist. Now, this book comes out on December 7th, 2025. Can't wait for you all to read it. And if you'd like any more information, you can check us out online at www.lmeglobal.net or take a look at our award-winning Science of Learning course for teachers and students called The Learning Blueprint. Otherwise, thank you all so much, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye, y'all.